transport groups to appeal for a jeepney fare hike, but will authorities grant their wish? The government kicks off the vaccination of college students against COVID-19 in Pampanga in preparation for the resumption of limited face-to-face classes in some degree programs. And red light, green light, this South Korean game is now known to over 111 million people worldwide as action thriller Squid Game becomes the biggest series Netflix has ever launched. Before those stories, we have this breaking news at this hour. The Interagency Task Force approves the recommendation to downgrade the COVID-19 alert status in Metro Manila from level 4 to 3 from October 16 to 31. Presidential and IATF spokesperson Harry Roque announced in a statement. We also have details of the quarantine classifications for the rest of the country. We'll tell you about that later on in the show. Now, 9 in 10 Filipinos worry about catching COVID-19. That is based on the Social Weather Station survey conducted from September 12 to 16 at the height of the Delta variant surge. The survey shows most of those worried came from the Visayas, followed by Mindanao, Metro Manila, and then Luzon. 60% of the respondents also think the worst is yet to come.
Nakakatakot pa rin na dahil sa sitwasyon natin kasi sino ba naman hindi kakabahan COVID kasi it's really parang between life and death. So parang nakakatakot talaga.
Despite the vaccination and declining cases, the public believes the threat of the virus remains. Now, transport groups are formally filing a petition for a minimum jeepney fare hike from 9 to 12 pesos. The nearby Luzon and Calabar zone. Our Rex Media tells us more.
It's a tug of war. The jeepney drivers on one side and commuters reeling from the effects of the pandemic on the other. Jeepney drivers and operators hit by rising fuel prices want no less than a fare hike. They want the minimum fare to go up from 9 to 12 pesos. This covers Metro Manila, Central Luzon, and Calabar zone for now. Transport groups are saying they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to add a burden to the commuters due to the increasing oil prices, which have gone up. The average price of diesel products is now at 49 pesos. Then there's the notable slash in income due to the government's health protocols. They can only fill in half of the capacity of their units.
Sa mga pasahero naman po namin, patawarin niyo po kami, hindi po namin gusto to. Gusto lang namin magtulungan tayo para naman po makasurvive kami. Kasi kung hindi niyo po kami tutulungan at patuloy po itong ginagawa ng mga oil company sa pagtataas ng kanilang mga presyo, paano po tayo makakasurvive?
Kung bumaba naman ang presyo ng petroleum product, kaming grupo rin naman ay nagkukusang magbaba. Magpapahit kami ng petition for reduction of fare. Ibabalik natin sa dati.
The Energy Department says there's a possibility that pump prices like diesel and gasoline will continue to increase next week. Transportation Secretary Artugade, however, is not keen on any fare hike.
It has been my position and it continues to be my position. Humana po tayo ng ibang pamaraan sa pakikipagtulungan sa mga jeepney driver, sa mga operator. Humana po tayo. Huwag ho tayong tumutok lang sa tinatawag na increasing of fare.
Some drivers, meanwhile, welcome the possibility of minimum fare hikes.
Dati kumikita kami ng siguro mga 500, ngayon nasa mga 400, 300 na lang gawa ng paglaki ng crudo
Kumikita na lang kami, halos pagkain na lang namin ng mga driver, yung pamilya namin sa ngayon kakain kinabukasan, wala na namang may handa sa pagkain kasi wala, mahirap ang biyahe.
Some commuters, however, are against it.
Dapat ganun pa rin po, ngayong pandemic, ganun pa rin yung presyo, huwag taasan. Kasi mahirap na po ngayon
Ang hirap na yun kasi ang hina ng ngayon, ng kita. Sa mga trabaho, mahirapan yung mga tao doon.
Transport regulators will hold hearings on the group's petition. The leaders say 3 pesos is just enough for the drivers to get by. Anything less will not help them at all. Rex Remipio, CNN Philippines.
As fuel prices continue to increase, transport regulators eye another round of subsidies for operators of public utility vehicles. The LTFRB says it will submit a proposal to the Energy Department on the amount of subsidy. Official data shows pump prices have increased by around 40% year to date. The price of gas has gone up by nearly 18 pesos, while the cost of diesel is now higher by almost 17 pesos.
As mentioned by DOE, we are coordinating with them for another possible phase 2 po ng ating fuel and gas subsidy for the PUV operators. Kasi ito po yung mukhang sabi nga ni Director Lino, yung recovery nito ay hindi mapupunta sa ating mga riding public, kundi po it will be subsidized by the government. So ngayon po, we are preparing the proposal to DOE to include po kung magkano po yung amount and ilan po yung beneficiaries po na ipapasok natin.
The Transportation Department, meanwhile, asks Congress to provide funds under next year's national budget for the continuation of the service contracting program. The agency says the program will benefit PUV operators and commuters. From fare hikes to supply of carrots, severe tropical storm Maring's damage to highland crops is another blow to farmers in Benguet province who are still reeling from unfair competition with carrots smuggled from China. Our senior correspondent Lois Calderon tells us a task force investigating the smuggling case is about to conclude the probe.
In its wake, severe tropical storm Maring left strawberry fields in La Trinidad and vegetable farms among the main vegetable produce of Benguet farmers. Maring's damage aggravates losses they've incurred from the influx of imported carrots smuggled from China. A task force investigating the carrot smuggling tells CNN Philippines of its initial findings.
Para pong dinideclare nilang non-agricultural product lang such as plastic. So that kung plastic yan, mapupunta dun sa mga item na yun. Ngayon, you could only see the manifestation in the market once they will be released in the market.
It's the Bureau of Plant Industry that's in charge of inspecting and quarantining agricultural imports. But if the carrots pass off as plastic or non-agricultural goods, the burden of ensuring they don't
and industry.
Confiscated po, ma'am, and the instruction of the secretary is to conduct laboratory testing because we really wanted to know what are what they call concerns regarding sanitary and phytosanitary. What are these? Yung pong maximum residue level, ibig sabihin yung paggamit po ng peste nila na pang-control. The other one is pest risk analysis, baka po nagdala ng pest dito.
Agriculture Undersecretary Ariel Cayanan says the task force wraps up its probe into carrot smuggling with a meeting with Secretary William Dar set for this week. But more than occasional raids by authorities, Benguet farmers call for long-term solutions.
Madagdagan yung mga parang wholesale market, hindi lang dito sa La Trinidad or Nueva Vizcaya, but closer to the consumers. Very efficient pa rin yung distribution natin eh. Pagdating na sa mga doble or triple, iba na kung dumating sa malls, times 4 pa kung minsan yung prices.
Lois Calderon, CNN Philippines.
Aside from over 500 million pesos worth of agricultural losses, Maring also brought massive flooding and landslides across Luzon, leaving at least 13
reports, as well as 8 people believed to be still missing. Just this morning in Baguio City, rescuers recovered the bodies of 2 girls whose homes were buried by a landslide at the height of the storm. The NDRRMC reports more than 19,000 people affected by Marine's onslaught. Of that number, more than 3,000 or 728 families displaced and staying in evacuation centers.
Now, despite severe tropical storm Marine's exit, expect rains ahead this time because of the southwest monsoon. Palawan, Occidental Mindoro, Zambales, Bataan, Batanes, and the Babuyan Islands may still experience cloudy skies and scattered rains, while in Metro Manila and the rest of the country also expect partly cloudy skies and isolated rains overnight until tomorrow morning. Now, coming up on Newsnight, college students rolling up their sleeves to get vaccinated for limited face-to-face classes, and are placeholder beds considered nuisance candidates? Find out what the Comelec has to say about this growing debate ahead of the elections. Stay tuned.
Oh, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Returning now to our top story, Metro Manila's quarantine status downgraded to alert level 3. The new classification takes effect from October 16th to the 31st. On your screens now, areas under the modified enhanced community quarantine, or MECQ. These include the provinces of Apayao and Kalinga in Cordilleras, and Cavite and Rizal in the Calabarzon region. These areas, meanwhile, will be placed under general community quarantine with heightened restrictions. In Luzon, we have Baguio City, Ilocos Sur, Pangasinan, and Cagayan, among others. A number of areas in the Visayas and Mindanao, including Bacolod City, Capiz, Lapu-Lapu City in Cebu, and Negros Oriental, as well as Zamboanga del Sur, Misamis Oriental, and Cagayan de Oro City. More areas also approved under GCQ. These include Ilocos Norte, Iloilo City, Iloilo Province, Cebu City, Cebu Province, and Mandaue City. The country is scrapping the mandatory quarantine. Beginning October 14th, the country is scrapping the mandatory quarantine in hotels and facilities for fully vaccinated Filipinos and foreign nationals coming from green or low-risk countries. This is provided they are negative for COVID-19 in RT-PCR tests taken 72 hours before arrival. Now, the government rolls out its school-based
and resorted to online learning.
Siyempre po nakakamiss po yung pong mga nakikita namin yung mga students namin, gano'n. And then meron din po kami mga yung mga real life scenarios po, siyempre, iba pa rin po yun talaga sa mga namin na sa job po namin, kumbaga. Talagang hindi mo maalis yung takot na nasa puso mo at nasa isip mo habang nag-aaral.
Commission on Higher Education Chairman Prospero de Vera says vaccination of college students is part of the efforts to push for limited face-to-face classes for some degree programs. The President has approved the conduct of limited in-person classes for medical courses, engineering, maritime, and hotel and restaurant management programs.
Our approach is by degree program. So we looked at all the degree programs. We classified those that really need face-to-face. Yun ang priority. Kasi not all degree programs are equally situated.
De Vera says being vaccinated is not a requirement for in-person classes, but schools are expected to encourage and incentivize those who are already inoculated. In the case of Our Lady of Fatima University, all faculty members who will participate in physical classes must be vaccinated, while unvaccinated students need to show negative COVID-19 test results first before attending the class.
We need to protect our students. And the best way to protect them is to make sure that the mentors are vaccinated in the first place. So with regards to students, if they're not willing to be vaccinated, then they have to have a good reason why they don't want to undergo the vaccination.
With enough supply of vaccines, Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez is encouraging all eligible students to get vaccinated as added protection against the deadly virus. From Pampanga, George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The health department is rushing to protect children from infectious diseases. Besides COVID-19, some of them have missed out on routine immunization because of the pandemic. Caroline Bonkin has that story.
Children from infant to 12 years old line up to get their vaccines at a school in Caloocan City on Wednesday. Immunization rates against infectious and fatal but vaccine-preventable diseases are down, and the health department is racing against time to prevent another outbreak on top of COVID-19. Measles, for example, is more contagious than COVID-19. Just one child could infect up to 18 others. The pandemic left millions of children vulnerable to measles, rubella, and tetanus diphtheria, among other diseases. Routine immunizations at schools have been disrupted by the pandemic, and many parents are afraid to bring their children to health centers. By September, only 30% of over 5 million children nationwide have been vaccinated. To catch up, the health department is bringing the vaccines closer to communities, hoping to cover 95% of children by December.
Some will do house to house, but some will likely just transport the patients to the health center. Pumupunta yung parang isang van sa isang lugar, tapos dun babakunahan yung mga bata.
Don't worry about the safety. These childhood vaccines are not new vaccines. They have been used for many years.
Children who have missed vaccines means they could get at least 2 different shots in one day. In Metro Manila, which has been under the strictest lockdowns most of the year, vaccine coverage is only at 24%. They need a more aggressive strategy. House-to-house vaccination every day in the next 15 days to cover 80% of children.
Kung gagawin lang natin yung every Wednesday, hindi ho namin maaabot lahat yung hahabulin na bilang ng bata.
As the program begins, Lito Bello took the opportunity to have his 7-year-old kid vaccinated.
Yung mga bata hindi pwede lumabas, di ba? Pangalawa, yung mga health center, mga kadalasan, mga sarado. Iniwasan din natin na mahawa yung mga bata.
Tito says, at least, he has one less thing to worry about, his child's health. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
A number of political parties have admitted fielding placeholders amid calls to prohibit the substitution of candidates. But for the Commission on Elections, this is not enough reason to declare proxies as nuisance bets. COMELEC spokesman James Jimenez says a mere declaration is not sufficient ground to question a candidate's intention to run. Jimenez says, and I quote, "The bona fide intention needs to be proven." In my interview with former COMELEC Commissioner Louis Guia last night, he said any proof a political aspirant has no good faith intention can make them a nuisance candidate, but Gia stressed the COMELEC has to go through certain proceedings. PDP Laban Senator Bato de la Rosa, who was tapped to run for president at the last minute, has admitted he wants Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte to take his place. Meantime, the Lacases CMD says it is still open to making the presidential daughter, Sara Duterte Carpio, its substitute standard bearer. The substitution for party bets lapses on November 15th. Only then can the COMELEC finalize the list of candidates. Veteran broadcaster Noli De Castro pulls out from the Senate race just 5 days after filing his certificate of candidacy. In a statement, the former senator and former vice president said he realized he could better help people through his work in media. He did not elaborate on his exact reason for dropping out. Last week, Kabayan Noli bid farewell to his news programs at ABS-CBN, but it is still unclear if he will return right away. He was running under Manila Mayor Isko Moreno's Acción Democrático party.
I believe and I support this decision because there is a personal reason behind it. We were informed yesterday.
A document seen by CNN Philippines showed De Castro signed his statement of withdrawal on Tuesday and was accepted by the COMELEC Wednesday morning. Following De Castro's move and the resignation of Moreno's chief of staff, Acción Democrático issued a statement saying people are putting malice to derail the candidate they are most threatened by. Straight ahead on Newsnight, Miss Universe Philippines Charity 2021 reveals she was very close to holding the main title for another country. And the Korean series Squid Game reaches a long-predicted milestone on Netflix. Details when we come back.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
Newsnight, I'm Pia Ontiveros. Beauty queen Victoria Vincent wants the universe to know she is a proud Filipina. The Miss Universe Philippines Charity 2021 reveals she got an offer to represent New Zealand in the global pageant. But
After giving it much thought, Vincent says she decided to turn down the offer. The Cavite beauty is thankful for the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but says her heart is and will always be for the Philippines.
Movie and music news now, including a new member of the MCU, a familiar face at the top of the charts, and the return of a horror movie icon. Here's CNN's David Daniel with a Hollywood Minute.
Ready to scream again? It's been 25 years since the first Scream and a decade since Scream 4. Now original stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette are back with a new generation of potential victims and a new Ghostface killer in an all-new Scream, due in theaters January 14th.
I guess just encourages people to kind of naturally raise their game.
English actor Will Poulter is joining the Marvel Universe. He's been cast as Adam Warlock, a character teased in a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 post-credits scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Production is scheduled to begin next month. Nearly 6 months after Taylor Swift's re-recorded album Fearless, Taylor's version debuted atop the Billboard 200, it's back at number 1. Billboard credits the jump to the release of the album on vinyl and signed CDs in Swift's merchandise store. Swift tweeted she signed so many discs, her hand is now frozen in the permanent shape of a claw. Sometimes topping the charts takes sacrifice. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
Action thriller Squid Game is now Netflix's biggest ever series launch. If you tuned in on the platform for the viral hit, you are one of 111 million accounts that watched the show since its debut just 25 days ago. It quickly beat out Bridgerton, which got 82 million households viewing in the first 28 days of release. The popular Korean program revolves around cash-strapped contestants participating in deadly children's games to win billions of Korean won. Now, Squid Game is just the latest in a series of Korean content that made its way across the globe. CNN's Paula Hancock has the details of its runaway success.
On social media, these images are everywhere. On television,
I'm here with the cast of Squid Game.
Everyone is talking about it.
Welcome.
Amazon's Jeff Bezos tweeted, "I can't wait to watch the show." Already hitting number 1 in 90 different countries on Netflix, Squid Game is a South Korean TV show where 456 debt-ridden contestants compete in childlike games for a prize of nearly $40 million. But the penalty for losing is death. Show creator Hwang Dong-hyuk has wanted to make this show for more than a decade, but studios rejected it.
When I showed it to people, a lot of them said that it was unfamiliar. It's strange and unfamiliar. What is this? What the hell is this? They said this in a negative way.
South Korea already has a strong film industry with deep talent pools and large profitable studios, but its TV shows were predominantly romantic soap operas until Netflix arrived.
I suddenly thought, will I be able to bring the show to life as I want it if Netflix is involved? I took that script from 10 years ago and showed it to them. Netflix said they loved it.
Netflix says it has already invested some $2 billion on Asian content and will invest another $500 million on making new Korean content alone this year.
I think in the past couple of years, we've seen Korean content viewing grow 4 times in the region. Parasite.
This is a golden age of Korean cultural exports. One win after another, music, films, TV shows, dubbed Hallyu or Korean Wave, and it's swept far beyond Asia, where it's been popular for the past 2 decades. Hwang says that this show's message resonates around the world.
The world is getting much harder to live in. Even in the last 10 years, wealth disparity is growing. Nations are facing economic strife, and the added element of the COVID pandemic has made the wealth gap even worse.
Social disparity mirrored in Oscar-winning Korean film Parasite. Film experts say that content from South Korea, with its turbulent history of war and military dictatorship, traditionally carries a strong political message.
Media is not just means of entertainment like in the United States or in the West, but media has been always considered a very important tool for political enlightenment or political resistance.
But it's not all politics.
It is still relatively cheap to produce dramas in South Korea compared in America. And the Squid Game, each episode cost less than $2 million, which is half of the price Netflix invested in each episode of House of Cards.
And the younger generation is far more open to foreign language content.
If you look at those who watch Parasite, a big number of the kind of audiences, or the audience that went to see Parasite in the United States was younger people, and they've been really keen to kind of break that 1-inch subtitle barrier.
The success of Squid Game is already helping other Asian content to trend on Netflix, while other streaming platforms are looking to replicate this enormous success. Paula Hancock, CNN Seoul.
We still have 73 days before Christmas, and that is it for tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Oh, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radyo Ronda DXKT Davao. Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is one of the most common causes of female infertility in the world. In fact, 1 in 10 women of childbearing age have this hormonal disorder. But despite how common it is, there are still misconceptions about the condition that have to be addressed. On the program today, we hope to shed some light in dealing with PCOS and debunk myths about it. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. PCOS is a condition in which women produce abnormal amounts of male hormones or androgens, and as a result, more challenging time getting pregnant. They're also at increased risk of developing other conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. But learning how to manage PCOS can help reduce its symptoms and prevent long-term health problems. So let's welcome our guests for today. With us is Dr. Sonia Desquitado. She's an obstetrician gynecologist from the Asian Hospital and Medical Center and a fellow at the Philippine Society for Reproductive Medicine. Also with us is Dr. Jeremy Robles. He's an endocrinologist from Chonghua Hospital in Cebu and the immediate past president of the Philippine Society of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism. Now, PCOS still isn't fully understood on what causes it, but research suggests that women with a strong family history of the condition are more likely to have it. I'll start the conversation kay Dr. Sonia. So, if a woman is diagnosed with PCOS, ano mga chances, doktora, na yung anak niyang babae or maybe yung kapatid niya ay may PCOS as well?
We actually know that scenario is very common in the clinic, no? Because, okay, by definition, PCOS is a syndrome. So patients, when they are young, patients with a family history of diabetes and hypertension, the women in the family have PCOS, and usually it's the sisters have it, no? And if you ask them, the mother had it, and the parents maybe, or the lola or the lolo are also diabetic and hypertensive. So yes, it's very common that women in the family have it.
Now, apart from genetics, there are several environmental factors din naman that can trigger this condition. Dr. Jeremy, tell us about these.
PCOS is really quite an interesting disease, no? So it's quite complex in the sense that it does manifest in different ways. But we know for a fact that genetic factors really play a big role here. But when we talk about environmental factors, obesity is one of the things you want to avoid if you're at risk in PCOS, and therefore you have to stick to a strict diet just to keep your patient's weight in check. Ethnicity also plays a role. Depends on if you're Asian, and even if you're in the U.S., you're still at risk. You have higher risk for the metabolic disorders of PCOS.
Aside from yung mga common thoughts about PCOS na this is one of the main causes of infertility, it can also cause a lot of metabolic problems as well.
Remember that a lot of these patients, when they go into the clinic, their main issue is infertility, but often when you do check them, they are at risk for diabetes, obesity. They may also have derangements with their blood pressure as well as their cholesterol. all of these metabolic cascade may be present in our PCOS patients.
Now, some of the risk factors as well include trouble with weight gain or weight loss. In fact, when either of the two are coupled with irregular menstrual periods, your doctor will usually suspect PCOS. Dr. Sonia, when a patient comes to you initially with their concern and then you eventually have a diagnosis of PCOS, what do they normally complain about?
More often than not, no, it's usually irregular periods. No, but when you say PCOS, no, before to diagnose PCOS, in 2 out of 3 criteria. Number one is the irregular periods. Also signs of an ovulation, they don't ovulate regularly. Some of them don't have periods at all. No. And then you'll have hirsutism, hyperandrogenism, increased testosterone in the body. So mabigote, mabalbon. No, some of them will have oily skin and acne. So signs of increased androgens. And also, of course, on transvaginal ultrasound, you'll see polycystic looking ovaries. So to diagnose PCOS, you need...
Sonia, a lot of the women with PCOS actually go undiagnosed. So they go through the symptoms, they go not really thinking about PCOS initially. Why do you think this is the case? Are the symptoms difficult to nail down initially because they don't interfere with daily life that much?
PCOS does not manifest fully in all patients. No? So usually in patients who are lean, who exercise, who eat well, they can have PCOS, but it's not a problem because their periods are fairly regular. They are delayed 1 or 2 days, but they will get a period every 1 to 2 months, and it does not bother them. So usually they will not go to the clinic.
Living with any disease or any medical condition for that matter never comes easy. Now, aside from the physical symptoms women with PCOS experience, the condition can also impact their mental health. Dr. Sonia, ano naman kaya yung mga struggles that women with PCOS may face with regards to their mental health?
PCOS women who are married, that is their greatest frustration. So usually it's not being able to conceive a child. And then even when they are young, they go to the clinic or they're planning to get married, they ask, Doc, can I have kids? So that is one of their main problems that they tell me. But usually if you reassure them and you show them that it is treatable and there are many patients in PCOS with children, they are relieved. I always emphasize to my patients, if you are scared of that and all the consequences of PCOS, then the basic treatment is really lifestyle.
So it really does affect, it can have an effect on the mental health because as we mentioned earlier on the show, stress is one of the risk factors as well. And stress and anxiety worsens PCOS, and PCOS worsens stress, anxiety, and depression. So it really goes both ways. Dr. Sonia, how can women living with the condition manage PCOS as well as the impact that it may have on their mental health?
The stress of the pandemic and staying at home, gaining weight, women with PCOS are not getting their period. So always we tell them now you have to start exercising, watch what you eat, and there are many medications that will help them menstruate. And that coupled with a healthy lifestyle and weight loss, the symptoms of PCOS will usually resolve or improve a lot.
It's common for women to find out that they have PCOS when they have trouble getting pregnant. But it often begins soon after the first menstrual period, sometimes as young as 11 or even 12 years old. And it can also develop in your 20s or your 30s. When we return, we'll debunk some myths about the condition. So keep it here on MedTalk Health Talk, only here on CNN Philippines.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
around 10 million women worldwide suffer from PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, the symptoms of this hormonal disorder vary from one person to another, but experiencing one of its hearsay signs doesn't necessarily mean that you have it. So here are the most common misconceptions about PCOS. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk. We're your partner in healthcare. I'll start with you, Dr. Sonia, with regard to debunking some of itong mga common misconceptions. One of them is nagsasabi na kapag naka-miss ng menses or ng period ng isang babae, ito ay automatically na meron siyang PCOS.
Well, number one, that's not true. No, there are many causes of irregular periods, and PCOS is just one of them. So you have any hormonal imbalance, stress can give you a hormonal imbalance. No? You could be pregnant. You could have problems with your thyroid or your prolactin. No? So all of these are other causes of irregular periods, and it's not just PCOS all the time.
Okay. Now, another misconception about PCOS that I'd like to talk about is how it causes infertility among women. But actually, women living with the condition, with PCOS, can have a healthy pregnancy. Dr. Sonia, is this true?
Yes, that is very, very true. You know, women with PCOS, they usually don't have any problems with their ovaries. The eggs in those ovaries are very normal. So it's just a problem of irregular ovulation. So they don't ovulate on a regular basis. And usually, we just need to give these patients medications to help them ovulate, and they become pregnant quite easily.
Yes, so if you want to have yourself checked for PCOS, you should see an OB-gynecologist or an endocrinologist to better assess you and find out the root of the problem that you're facing. Dr. Jeremy, why is this important? Why should someone really get the truth about the matter from their doctor?
When we see these patients, we do a general checkup of these patients. The history is going to be important. The familial history is very important. Of course, we're going to work up for metabolic disorders. We're going to check the BP as well as the other parameters, the blood sugar, cholesterol, and all the other metabolic components that may be present in these patients. As I said earlier, they're really at risk for metabolic disorders. And, you know, there's really that link that puts together your metabolic disease and your PCOS, and I think we'll cover that a little bit later.
Yes. Now, early in the show, we discussed that women with PCOS have higher levels of male hormones or androgens, and this can make ovulation a little bit more challenging, which then causes irregular periods, maybe acne, excess hair growth for that matter. Now, it also increases the chances of developing other serious health problems. Dr. Jeremy, you touched about this a little bit earlier, but let's remind our viewers, what are some of the complications that can happen with having PCOS?
So the problem with PCOS is really a mix of metabolic disorders. The key words that you want to remember when you have PCOS is insulin resistance. So if you're insulin resistant because you're overweight, you're diabetic, that is closely linked to PCOS. In fact, chances are sometime in the future you may develop diabetes, and therefore you really have to struggle to control your blood sugar as well as control your weight. So these are things that you need to look at.
You mentioned about diabetes, but high blood pressure is another common medical condition here at home that may be aggravated by someone with PCOS. Dr. Sonia, how can PCOS contribute to this? Anong connection ng PCOS and someone's blood pressure?
Patients have to understand that PCOS is a syndrome that at one end you have polycystic ovaries, irregular period, and at the other end, later on in life, it's hypertension and diabetes. Patients with PCOS are more prone to developing hypertension when they are pregnant, just as they are more prone to developing diabetes when they are pregnant. And they're also more prone to developing hypertension and diabetes when they are older.
Mm-hmm.
So how to prevent that? Again, it's lifestyle and screening by your doctor.
So, Dr. Jeremy, if they adjust their PCOS, will it also address their diabetes? Will it also address their hypertension? Or can all these different metabolic problems be independent from PCOS?
I agree with Dr. Sonia earlier that the workup should not be one-dimensional. Often you have to look at it in a bigger picture and see that these patients, even as stable as they seem, may develop a lot of complications brought about by the initial problem, which is PCOS, and therefore the screening process is pretty much extensive, looking at hormones, looking at different parameters. So to answer the question of whether or not you stop one, do you stop the other, really, if you're able to control and stabilize this patient early on, there's really a possibility that you're able to deal with the problem. So if you have PCOS, you keep this patient in a good weight, not overweight, not obese, you can help them get pregnant. So really, it is a lifetime disease as well. So this one will need a lot of counseling. We need to discuss with the patient really the impact in terms of their lives, how PCOS will affect them.
The types of treatment for PCOS may depend on whether or not a woman plans to become pregnant. More on this when we come back. We want to be your partner for a lifetime of good health, so stay with us here on CNN Philippines.
O, anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a lifelong condition, and each case is unique, so treatment usually depends on the symptoms a woman is experiencing. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, where your health comes first. Dr. Sonia, can you walk us through what the typical or what a treatment plan looks like for someone who wants to have a baby but is diagnosed with PCOS?
So when the patient wants to have a baby, then treatment is directed towards that end. So any treatment for infertility is done against the background of the lifestyle modifications that we talked about earlier. So, and usually when patients want to have a baby, they give them medicine to make them ovulate. And there are many drugs now that can help them do that. Some of them would be clomiphene, letrozole. You even have the injectable gonadotropin, which we use usually for IVF cases.
Now, if diagnosed with a condition, we want to stress that there's no reason to believe that it should negatively impact your life, because treating PCOS usually starts with making healthy lifestyle choices. Dr. Sonia, let's talk about that. What should one do? How should they be healthy?
Number one, exercise regularly, maintain a normal body weight. They must watch what they eat, because they are prone to hypertension and diabetes.
Now, Dr. Jeremy, if a woman with PCOS does become pregnant, she is able to go through that, does she run the risk of having any of these gestational diabetes, maybe hypertension during her pregnancy?
That's really true. So these patients, as I said, they're already a pre-diabetic state. So a lot of these patients we follow closely whenever they go into pregnancy already. As they go into pregnancy, we know that they're already considered high risk, and therefore we should watch them closely. So some of these patients develop early on these manifestations of hypertension, as well as gestational diabetes, or for that matter, pre-gestational or overt diabetes in pregnancy, and therefore this will entail a closer follow-up, as well as closer, more aggressive treatment for these patients during their pregnancy.
Dr. Sonia, you have something else to share.
That's a good question. We actually my society, the Philippine Society of Reproductive Medicine, actually just finished writing the new clinical practice guidelines for PCOS. And PCOS in pregnancy, we really have to advise these women that they are at risk for complications. There's a greater chance of preeclampsia or hypertension in pregnancy, development of gestational diabetes mellitus. These women are also at increased risk for delivering by cesarean section rather than normally. Also, their babies are at increased risk for growth problems, not just the classic too large babies, but also some of them can be growth retarded.
Dr. Sonia, what can you advise our viewers out there, especially those who are diagnosed with PCOS or who are unsure that they probably might have PCOS?
Say what I usually tell my patients, that PCOS is a lifetime lifestyle disease, but it's very treatable, and mainstay of treatment is the lifestyle modification, and we will treat your symptoms as they appear. Many patients will have healthy lives with many children.
Yes, very true. And Dr. Jeremy, do you have a message for our viewers, especially when it comes to PCOS?
Yes, I have 3 L's for our patient. First, PCOS is life-centered. Ibig sabihin, you have to live life, no? So if you do have PCOS, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. We have to give hope to these patients that, you can go on with your life. You just have to be careful with the choices that you make. The second L is lifelong. This is a lifelong treatment that you have to keep in mind. It's not going to go away in a couple of weeks. And of course, the last one, Dr. Sonia said this lifestyle disease. So ito po yung the choices you make with the food, the exercise, the weight issues, all of these needs to be taken into consideration. Don't lose hope. We can actually help you. A lot of people can help you. We're putting in a lot of effort to educate people about PCOS. No, it does not choose if you're rich or if you're poor. It can occur in childbearing age for a lot of people, and therefore you need to get help if you are diagnosed with PCOS.
And we want to remind our viewers that many women living with PCOS have gone on to have successful pregnancies, as what was mentioned earlier. And the treatments available ensure that women with PCOS live healthy and happy lives. With that, I'd like to thank obstetrician gynecologist Dr. Sonia Desquitado and endocrinologist Dr. Jeremy Robles for guiding us on this topic today. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time. Stay safe, everyone.
Anyari sa'yo? Ba't nakasimangot ka? Alam ko na. Masakit ang katawan mo, ano? Sa sobrang trabaho? O di kaya masakit ang ulo sa sobrang stress? Break ka muna. Hinga ng malalim at imasahe ang ulo mo gamit ang Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Ako rin ganun eh. Kaya pag mataas ang tensyon sa trabaho, mag-Herbalaya break ka muna.
Herbalaya Liniment Oil. Amoy na kaaya-aya. Sa bawat pahid ay ginhawa.